In the Istanbul Archaeology Museum, behind a locked door that requires written authorization to open, there is a clay tablet about the size of a closed hand catalog, number NI 22461. It was excavated from the temple precinct of Nippur in 1893 by an Ottoman-American expedition and shipped to Istanbul shortly before the museum officially opened. It has not been publicly displayed in more than a century. Most of the museum staff themselves have never seen it. What is written on the tablet is a description of the inside of the earth, not the underworld in the theological sense. The Sumerians had a separate word for that. Core, the land of the dead. NI 22461 describes something else entirely. It describes a structure, concentric layers, each with distinct properties, descending toward a central point. The outer layer is described as the soil where men plant their grain. The next layer is called the bones of the world, which the scribe clearly separates from ordinary stone. Beneath that is a layer of water that does not move. Beneath that lies what the tablet calls the burning sea. At the center, the text says, rests a god, placed there by the older gods, bound with chains of star metal and sealed beneath a stone no force could break. The Sumerian phrase, translated as burning sea, is a compound that appears nowhere else in surviving cuneiform texts. Its literal meaning combines water and fire held together. Scholars have long dismissed it as poetic imagery, yet the scribe specifically explains that this burning sea is liquid like water, but moves like fire and surrounds the buried god the way an ocean surrounds an island. Modern geophysics confirms that Earth possesses a central iron core, while the outer portion of that core is a sea of molten liquid metal burning at temperatures comparable to the surface of the sun. Strip away the scientific vocabulary, and the description becomes startlingly simple: a solid metal center, surrounded by a burning liquid ocean. He retired before publishing the work formally. The internal museum memo, summarizing his conclusions, reportedly still exists within the Istanbul archive. The official classification of the tablet remains unchanged: a religious cosmographic document of regional interest. Access to the original artifact remains restricted on conservation grounds. The standard academic explanation is coincidence. Ancient civilizations observed soil, stone, volcanoes, and natural heat. They created poetic cosmologies using symbolic language. Any resemblance to modern science, scholars argue, is retrospective interpretation. Individually, each element can be explained away, but the details become harder to dismiss together. First, the tablet distinguishes the bones of the world from ordinary surface stone. The text insists this layer is deeper, denser, and fundamentally different from visible rock. Modern geology makes the exact same distinction between Earth's crust and mantle. Second, the tablet places a layer of unmoving water between the deep stone and the burning sea. Modern geophysics describes sections of the upper mantle as material that behaves plastically, rock that flows slowly like liquid across geological timescales, water that does not move from a human perspective. Third, and most importantly, the tablet describes a solid center surrounded by a burning liquid sea that is the defining structure of Earth's core, a solid inner core encased within a molten outer core. No surviving Greek, Egyptian, or Vedic cosmology describes Earth this way. None, as far as the historical record shows. This Sumerian tablet stands alone. And this is where the story becomes strange, because nothing about it is truly hidden. The tablet exists. The translation exists. The museum archive exists. What remains ignored is the implication. The Istanbul Archaeology Museum has reportedly denied every modern request for re-examination of NI 22461 since Donbas' 1991 study. Independent requests submitted between 2014 and 2022 were rejected on conservation grounds. The problem is disciplinary separation. Geophysicists cannot read cuneiform. Assyriologists generally dismiss the parallels as coincidence. The artifact sits directly between two fields, exactly where serious investigation rarely happens. And there is another thread connected to it. Fragment from the library of preserve an alternate Babylonian tradition involving the primordial deity Kingu. In the standard Enuma Elish narrative, Kingu is killed by the god Marduk and humanity is created from his blood. But several fragmented variants describe something else. Kingu is not killed. He is buried deep beneath layers of the earth, restrained with chains of celestial metal beneath the world itself. When these fragments are compared with NI 22461, the buried god at Earth's center begins to resemble Kingu himself, not merely a defeated deity, but the imprisoned force sustaining the world. Modern science tells us Earth's magnetic field is generated by convection within the liquid outer core. Without that magnetic shield, solar radiation would slowly strip away the atmosphere, making life impossible. The Sumerian text says that if the chains binding the central god were ever broken, the burning sea would still, the unmoving waters would dry, and the bones of the world would crack apart. The responsible conclusion is still caution. NI 22461 is almost certainly not a literal scientific description of Earth's interior. The text is damaged, the translation is debated, the language remains highly symbolic. The burning sea could easily represent volcanic, mythological, or theological imagery, rather than molten metal. That is the academically responsible position, and it is probably correct. What remains difficult to explain is how uniquely precise the correspondence appears. The Sumerians alone described an Earth with layered internal structure, a solid center surrounded by burning liquid, and distinct transitions between each layer. Nearly 4,000 years before modern seismology confirmed those structures scientifically. If it was coincidence, it was an extraordinary one. The tablet remains in Istanbul. The translation remains buried in archives. The chains in the old story still hold. The burning sea beneath the earth is still moving. And nearly a century after laymen confirmed the existence of the inner core, science itself is still trying to understand what truly exists beneath our feet. On the broken reverse edge of the tablet, the scribe carved a final line, which Donbaz translated as a warning. Do not seek to break the chains, for the seas of fire are not your enemy. If you want more investigations like this, the forgotten tablets, the unpublished translations, and the museum drawers no one opened, subscribe. Next week, we examine the Kingu fragments themselves and the ritual the older gods supposedly used to bind the prisoner beneath the earth. The tablet was written around 1800 BCE. The layered structure of Earth was not confirmed by science until the seismological work of in 1936. The question is not whether the Sumerians understood modern geology. The question is what exactly the scribe at Nippur believed he was describing. If you follow investigations like these, the forgotten records, the untranslated fragments, and the museum archives nobody seriously examined, subscribe. We uncover a new investigation every week. Now, let me show you exactly what is on the tablet. NI 22461 was first partially translated in the 1920s by the German Assyriologist. He described it as a cosmographic fragment of unusual character and noted that its description of Earth's interior differed sharply from standard Sumerian theological geography, preserved in traditions connected to the Zimmermann published his findings in a specialist journal in 1924, and the text was largely ignored. Scholars assumed it was simply a regional theological variation, perhaps influenced by a lost Akkadian tradition. The tablet was archived and forgotten for decades. In 1991, the Turkish Assyriologist, then deputy director of the Istanbul Archaeology Museum, began re-examining the museum's Nippur collection as part of a digital cataloging project. His revised translation of NI 22461, which was never formally published, identified details Zimmermann had overlooked. The most striking observation was that the layers described in the text appear in the same order and in roughly the same proportional sequence as the modern geophysical model of Earth's interior: crust, mantle, outer core, inner core. For layers, correct order, correct boundary descriptions. According to Donbaz, the tablet describes a surface layer where humans live, a deeper, dense layer distinct from ordinary rock, a motionless fluid layer, a burning liquid sea surrounding a solid center. His interpretation circulated quietly within Turkish academic circles during the late 1990s, but never entered mainstream Assyriology.